My grandfather was a man feared and revered throughout the surrounding villages for miles around. In the region, people called him Tran Tam Gia. Yet behind his back some whispered another name, Tran the Half-Immortal. Not because he ever claimed such a title. My grandfather was a quiet man all his life, never one to boast of his abilities. And yet, for decades of practice, choosing auspicious dates for groundbreakings, reading burial sites, suppressing malevolent forces, correcting geomancy, and arranging funerals for the dead, he had never once been wrong. Our family was the only one in the area whose livelihood was funeral rites. Before I even learned how to walk, I was already familiar with the smell of incense, the wail of mourning horns, and the dull thuds of earth striking coffin lids during dawn burials. What terrified others felt like nothing more than part of everyday life to me. But my grandfather's true skill did not lie in funerals. He could look at a house and know whether there would be a death within 3 months. He could examine a grave and predict whether future descendants would prosper or decline. Some gravely ill people, whose conditions baffled hospitals, would recover simply after he observed their complexion, asked for their birth hour, and instructed them to change the direction of their bed, move their stove, or rebury ancestral graves. Among the locals, a saying spread quietly. Old Man Tran has already touched the threshold of immortality. He's just 1 step short. What that step was, no one knew. They only knew my grandfather followed one strict rule. For each person, he would cast only 1 divination in an entire lifetime. Some begged on their knees outside our door for 3 days and nights. He refused. Some wealthy patrons stacked gold and silver until the courtyard was full. He still shut the door. He once told my father, "A divination is fate itself. Fate cannot be calculated carelessly. Cast too many and the seeker may live, but the one who reads the fate will bear the karma." I was too young then to understand what karma meant. I only remembered that whenever he said those words, his voice would sink low, and his eyes would grow deep, as though he were looking straight through something invisible. The event that truly convinced the entire village that the Tran family was entangled with a dragon vein happened about a month before I was born. That day, the Tran ancestral house, standing for over 100 years, suddenly collapsed when a massive roof beam gave way. There was no strong wind, no heavy rain. The beam, thick as a grown man's arm, split without warning and crashed down into the main hall. By sheer luck, no one was inside at the time. Otherwise, death would have been certain. The news spread instantly, throwing the village into chaos. People flooded our home, some terrified, some curious, others pale as if struck by terrible news. For there had long been a rumor in the village. The elders said that beneath the Tran ancestral house lay a stone serpent, not an ordinary snake. It was a vein serpent, born from dragon energy deep within the earth, something that, after 100 years of cultivation, could transform into a dragon. The Tran family had prospered for a century by borrowing its dragon energy, while the serpent used the ancestral house to suppress the heavenly tribulation it faced, cultivating in silence. Once the time came, it would shatter the earth, transform into a dragon, and ascend to the heavens. But when the dragon vein was torn free, the backlash would strike the entire land. No one in the village would escape. What sent chills down people's spines was this. According to the legend, The moment the stone serpent transformed into a dragon would be exactly 100 years after the Tran ancestral house was built. And the day the beam collapsed was precisely the 100th anniversary. The villagers packed our courtyard, all eyes fixed on my grandfather, filled with fear and pleading. My father later said that my grandfather spoke not a word. He sat alone on the front steps, lit his pipe, and smoked half a bowl in silence. The curling smoke obscured half his deeply lined face. Only after a long time did he stand. He went inside and carried out 7 sharpened wooden stakes, each taller than a man, iron-capped at the tip, the wood still sticky with fresh sap. His voice was hoarse but firm as he addressed the villagers. "Drive these 7 stakes into the ground, exactly where I point. Beneath each stake bury 7 large coins." Someone trembled as they asked, "Third Master Tran, what kind of formation is this?" My grandfather looked up at the sky, then down at the earth, and replied slowly, "The 7 stars locking the dragon formation." The air in the courtyard turned icy. He continued, "For 7 days, no one is to touch them. After 7 days, dig them up, burn them completely, and scatter the ashes into the river. Do it right, and the village will be spared." No one dared ask another question, because when my grandfather spoke those words, there was no reassurance in his eyes, only resolve. From the day the beam collapsed, the entire village felt as though an invisible hand had seized its throat. By day, people still worked the fields and spoke casually. But once the sun dipped behind the mountains, every household bolted its doors and extinguished their lamps early. Dogs howled all night, yet none dared bark loudly, only low growls, as if fearing something lurking in the darkness. Children were forbidden from going near the Tran ancestral grounds. Adults, when passing by, unconsciously quickened their steps, never daring to look back. The legend of the stone serpent was spoken of more than ever. My father said the tale dated back to my great-grandfather's time. No one had taken it seriously until the ancestral house collapsed. Only then did people realize that every detail of the legend matched reality with terrifying precision. The elders said the land our village sat upon was a wounded dragon lair. A branch of a dragon vein descended from deep mountains, only to be severed here. Trapped dragon energy accumulated underground, eventually giving birth to a serpent spirit imbued with dragon ki. The serpent was no ordinary being, but not yet worthy of becoming a dragon. To transform, it needed time and protection. The Tran ancestral house, according to legend, was that protection. It was said the Tran ancestors, whether by chance or design, built their house directly above the serpent's head, using human vitality and ancestral incense to suppress its heavenly tribulation. In exchange, the Tran family was nourished by dragon energy, prospering for 100 years. One side borrowed chi, the other borrowed lives. That invisible pact lasted exactly 1 century. When the term expired, the serpent had to ascend. If it didn't, heaven would punish it. If it did, those on the surface would suffer disaster. My father said someone once asked my grandfather directly, "If that serpent truly becomes a dragon, will calamity strike our village?" My grandfather replied with only 1 sentence, "When a dragon vein moves, no one stands outside it." After setting up the 7 stars locking the dragon formation, my grandfather warned every household. The 7 stakes were driven into precise positions. Beneath each lay 7 ancient coins, their faces worn smooth, the square holes darkened as if soaked in blood. he said. "These 7 days are 7 days borrowed from heaven. Touch them, and you bear the consequences yourself." The first 6 days passed without incident. The sky stayed clear. The earth remained still. People began to relax. Some even said maybe it was just a coincidence. All this superstition. Then came the 7th day. As the sun set, black clouds rolled in from nowhere, blanketing the sky. The wind was strange, not strong, but piercingly cold, as if rising from beneath the earth. That night, a drunken man staggered through the village. He had been drinking since afternoon and wandered past the Tran ancestral house, cursing loudly, mocking the stone serpent, feng shui, and nonsense ghost stories. No one stopped him in time. He stood before one of the 7 stakes, laughed hysterically, and urinated on it. At that instant, a dry crack of thunder split the sky, despite the absence of rain. The wind died completely. Every dog in the village began to howl in unison, long mournful cries that made one's blood run cold. My father said my grandfather, sitting indoors, suddenly sprang to his feet, his face drained of color. Staring toward the ancestral house, he whispered, "It's ruined." That very night, the ground beneath the ancestral house trembled. Not like an earthquake, but as if something were stirring, twisting, deep underground. The clouds sank lower, pressing against the rooftops. In the air echoed a low, muffled roar, neither beast nor thunder. It sounded like something enraged. Then, abruptly, everything fell silent. The next morning, the sun rose as though nothing had happened. But at the 5th watch, just as the roosters crowed, a heart-rending cry came from the Tran ancestral hall. My grandfather was dead. He died at dawn, exactly as the roosters crowed. There was no cry for help, no signs of struggle, no intrusion. When the family found him, he was seated upright in a wooden chair in the main hall, back straight, hands resting on his knees, as if he had merely fallen asleep. But his face told another story. Blood seeped from all 7 orifices, not flowing but congealed into dark streaks at the corners of his eyes, ears, nostrils, and mouth. His skin was ashen and stiff. His eyes remained open, staring toward the ancestral altar. Within them lingered something like regret. My grandmother was the first to find him. She collapsed at once and fainted. News spread rapidly. Within half a morning, the entire village knew. But unlike other funerals, no one dared step inside our home. People gathered in small clusters outside the gate, peering in from afar. Someone whispered, bleeding from all 7 orifices, "This isn't a natural death." Another sighed. He touched the dragon vein. Heaven has come to collect its debt. When township officials arrived, they took one look at the body and instinctively stepped back, faces pale. They had seen many deaths, but never one with such oppressive yin energy. There was no autopsy. No one dared suggest moving the body far away. In the end, he was buried the same day, according to custom. But even the encoffining was strange. 3 strong men lifted his body together, yet the moment they touched him, an icy chill pierced their bones. Not the cold of death, but a cold that raised goosebumps and sent hearts racing. One man blurted out, so light." Indeed, my grandfather's body was far lighter than a living person's, as if something had been extracted from within. When placing him in the coffin, my father noticed scorch marks on his palms, blackened as though burned by something unseen. No one dared ask. The funeral passed in silence. No music, no wailing. Mourners merely lit incense, bowed deeply and hurried away, afraid that lingering might draw something's attention. That night there was no moon. The wind whispered through the bamboo grove behind the house, sounding like hushed murmurs. My father kept vigil beside the coffin all night. Near dawn, as the oil lamp flickered, he heard a soft tap from inside the coffin. Not wood cracking, more like someone knocking from within. Cold sweat broke out on his back. He held his breath, listening, but the sound did not repeat. The lamp flickered, the coffin's shadow twisted on the wall like a crouching beast. The next morning, during the funeral procession, another strange thing occurred. The road to the grave had always been flat. Yet halfway there, one wheel of the hearse suddenly sank. The earth beneath hollowed out as if something had been dug away. The villagers murmured, "The dragon energy has moved." No one dared bury my grandfather in the ancestral grave. At an elder's suggestion, they chose a low mound far from the ancestral house as a temporary resting place. As the final earth was filled in, the wind abruptly stopped. An eerie stillness fell. At that moment, my grandmother regained consciousness. She stared at the grave and burst into sobs, repeating, "He's paid it back. Now it's someone else's turn." No one understood her words, but my father said that as she spoke, a flash of lightning streaked across the distant sky. No thunder, just a brief illumination before darkness returned. Like an eye, opening then closing. After my grandfather's burial, no one mentioned the 7 stars locking the dragon formation again. Not because it was forgotten, but because no one dared speak of it. The 7 wooden stakes still stood around the ancestral house, unmoved by days of wind and rain. Yet the more people looked at them, the more uneasy they felt, as though the stakes were not suppressing something below, but were instead being pressed down by it. On the 3rd day after the funeral, township officials came to inspect the ancestral house for structural danger. My father knew it was just an excuse. What they really wanted to see was what lay beneath the ground. The excavation began early in the morning. The air was stifling, though it was only early autumn. The soil was hard as stone, each strike of the shovel producing a dull, hollow sound. Less than a meter down, one man's shovel bounced violently, nearly hitting his face. He bent down and went pale. Beneath the yellow earth and gravel lay a segment of gray-white. Bone, not human. It was long and slightly curved, its surface smooth as if worn down over centuries. Faint patterns ran along it, like scales. The entire crew froze. Someone stammered, "What kind of bone is that?" No one answered. My father stepped forward. One glance made his heart pound. He had handled countless funerals, human bones, animal bones, but had never seen anything like this. They continued digging. With each strike, more soil collapsed, revealing additional lengths of bone, connected and winding like a serpent's body. The bones grew larger, some as thick as an adult torso. Eventually, the entire foundation lay exposed. What lay beneath silenced everyone. It was the skeleton of a colossal serpent. Its skull faced the mountains, its body coiled beneath the house, its tail stretching far back, nearly filling the entire plot. The eye sockets were deep and hollow. At the crown of the skull protruded a rugged, bony ridge, like the trace of horns that had never fully formed. Some turned away to retch, others collapsed to their knees, trembling. The stone serpent, it truly exists. At that moment, the sky darkened, clouds gathered overhead, Wind surged, whipping dust into the air. Amid the gusts, a low sound echoed, like a long sigh rising from deep underground. Before my father could react, the entire skeleton began to tremble. Not violently, but unmistakably. From the center of the serpent's skull, a thin stream of gray-white mist rose, spiraling upward. Someone screamed, "Something's flying up." The mist elongated, slowly forming the vague shape of an incomplete dragon. No scales, no claws, only a blurred dragon shadow. But its pressure made breathing difficult. The dragon shadow lifted its head and released a deep roar. Not loud, but enough to make the ground quiver and trees sway. In the blink of an eye, it shot straight into the sky, piercing the clouds and vanishing without a trace. Then the clouds dispersed. The wind ceased. Sunlight fell upon the empty ground where the skeleton lay still, as if nothing had happened. But everyone present knew. What had been suppressed for 100 years had departed. That afternoon, a torrential rain fell. It lasted 3 days and 3 nights. And during that rain, I was born. I was born on the stormiest night the village could remember. Rain poured as if the sky were collapsing. Thunder and lightning raged. Wind bent the old bamboo behind the house. Mountain water flooded the fields, carrying red mud. The elders said it wasn't ordinary rain, but rain washing a dragon lair. When I cried for the first time, lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the land. Some swore they saw a long winding shadow among the clouds before it vanished, but no one dared mention it to my parents. The midwife froze after delivering me. She stared for a long time, her expression growing strange. Trembling, she handed me to my mother and hurried away, muttering, "Ah, karma, such heavy karma." My mother, weak from labor, didn't hear clearly. Only my grandmother stood nearby, face pale, eyes never leaving me. My father later said that when he ran outside to fetch hot water, the 7 wooden stakes around the ancestral house cracked softly, creak, creak, as if splitting from within. The next morning, the rain stopped. The entire village came to see me, not out of simple curiosity, but to witness the child born alongside such omens. At first glance, I looked ordinary, thin, red, breathing faintly. Only one thing was different. On my chest was a birthmark. It stretched from my shoulder to my chest, faint and curved, like the outline of an unfinished dragon scale. Some people turned away immediately. Others whispered, "This child shouldn't grow up here." 3 days later, my father carried me to my grandfather's grave to report the happy news. The moment he set me down before the tombstone, a cold wind rose. The leaves rustled. The incense burned unusually fast. Before my father could pray, he heard a soft cough behind him. He turned. An old man stood not far away. No one knew when he had appeared. He wore a faded gray robe, stooped, hair snow white. Yet his eyes shone with an unnatural brightness. He stared at me for a long time. Then he sighed. At last, he has been born. My father tensed. "Who are you?" The old man didn't answer. He stepped closer, bent down, and examined the birthmark on my chest, his gaze complex. "This child still carries unresolved dragon key. He is not ordinary." My father felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What do you mean?" The old man straightened, gazing toward the distant mountains. The stone serpent never completed its transformation. The dragon vein was severed, its key scattered. Something must bear the burden. He looked back at my father. "This child is the substitute." My father clenched his fists. "If it is a calamity, Please tell me how to avoid it." The old man fell silent for a long time. Finally, he shook his head. It cannot be avoided. His lifespan, only 20 years. My father's ears rang. 20 years? What do you mean? The old man met his gaze, each word heavy as stone. 20 years of age. He will not pass it. With that, the old man turned and walked away, his figure quickly dissolving into the misty dirt road, as if he had never existed. My father stood before the grave for a long time. When he finally looked down at me, he saw that I was smiling. A newborn infant, amid cold wind and damp earth, smiling faintly, as if I had long known my fate.